Not that we'd ever do that in public, right?
I think that's a good rule of thumb all the time.
Every mic is hot.
Yeah.
Every camera live.
Chair Gore, this is Lynette. Just wanted to let you know that I'll be clerking the meeting this morning for you.
Great. Thank you, Lynette. Appreciate it. It looks like Lucas is getting in, and there is Director Stallard. Terrific. So it looks like we've got everyone. So why don't we go ahead and begin the meeting. And so welcome everyone to the SACOG Policy and Innovation Committee of Monday, June 8th, 2020. And we will begin with roll call, please.
Thank you. Good morning. Just a reminder that this meeting is being recorded. Members of the public that are participating by phone can press *9 if they'd like to make a comment. Additionally, any committee members that might be joining us by phone, I don't see any, but just in case, you can press *9 as well. And then just a reminder to our committee members that if you're not speaking, if you could please press mute so that we don't get any feedback. I'll go ahead and take roll now. Director Allard.
Here.
Douglas.
Present.
Frericks.
Here.
Kozlowski.
Here.
Leahy. Looks like he's absent. Lozano.
Here.
Zaragoza.
Here.
Vice Chair Stallard. I see you there, Vice Chair Stallard. Thank you. And Chair Gore.
Here. Great. Thank you everyone for joining us. And I realize we didn't do the Pledge of Allegiance. So now we will go ahead and do the Pledge of Allegiance. I don't know if we have a, oh, she's going to, wonderful. Thank you. We have a flag on the screen. So if you all would join me, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. This is now time for public communication. So if anyone would like to address the committee on an item that is not on our agenda, this is the time to do so. I believe that we received an email communication that Renee Garcia sent out to, I believe, our committee this morning from, was it Elk Grove?
Yes, it's from the City of Elk Grove.
City of Elk Grove. And I don't know if they wanted to speak, but I wanted to make sure you all received that and make a note of that. Since it's 9 pages long, we probably don't need to read it. But make sure that you all see that, and then any other public comment.
Chair Gore, I'm not aware of any other comment, but just wanted to let you know that the City of Elk Grove letter will be posted on our website following the meeting. We didn't receive it in time this morning to do that prior to the meeting, but it will be posted after the meeting.
Great, thank you very much, Lynette.
Madam Chair, we actually do have a member of the public who's raised their hand for an item not on the agenda.
Okay, terrific. Let's have that person bring them in.
Very good. Okay, Mr. Tartagia, you should be able to speak.
Yes, this is Jeff Tartagia as an advocate. One of the concerns that I bring up for the policy is that it seems like you are, which item 2 will be directing about lobbying and other advocacy efforts, when Covina and the budget is going on here, and knowing that next meeting will take place in August, when we'll have a much better idea of the state of California. But there is a consistent right now dealing with the should we say Office of Emergency Services in preparing for a second wave. And we're talking about from 24 to 36 months. And I just bring up that concern is how is SACOG examining the fact that this that we're in may be something that's not a year long, but is a longer period stretch, you know, and in knowing that it's already impacting budget wise, but also just preparation-wise of what the next 24, 36 months may look like. That's my public comment that's not on the agenda.
Great. Thank you, Jeffrey. Appreciate your comments and your input. And to your point, I know it's something that SACOG will definitely be looking at as we have to address our budgets in the future. Any other public comment? All right, great. Thank you. We will move on then to our next agenda item, which is the consent agenda. And those are our minutes from our last meeting, May 4th, 2020.
So moved.
Second,
I
Stallard.
think, and that was Saragosa who moved, second by Stallard. Although, well, let's see. How do you want to do that, Lynette? Do you need eyes, thumbs up, or do you want to do roll call?
We need to do a roll call vote.
Okay, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Director Allard?
Yes.
Thank you. Douglas?
Aye.
Frericks?
Aye.
Kozlowski?
Yes.
Director Leahy?
Abstain.
Abstain. Lozano?
Aye.
Saragosa?
Aye.
Vice Chair Stallard?
Aye.
Chair Gore?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Great, thank you. Move on to item 2, which is contract amendment to lobbying services contract. And Christina, if you would like to lead us off, I believe that's Christina.
Yes, perfect, thank you. So this item is to extend our contract with KP Public Affairs for lobbying services to continue advocacy for Green Means Go and continue to increase our presence in the state capitol. Staff is recommending extending the contract for 6 months at the existing rate of $10,075 per month through the end of this year. It would bring the total cost of the contract to $151,125, which would cover from October of last year through December of 2020. Just as a quick reminder, SACOG contracted with KP last fall, and the board has authorized a contract extension through June of this year. That means that the existing contract will expire in approximately 3 weeks. This will end their contract right in the middle of our Green Means Go advocacy efforts. Work on Green Means Go and the state budget request will continue past June 2020 as we focus on multiple funding sources, including the state budget and the Governor's Economic Recovery Task Force. Given the state legislative and budget cycles and the expectation that the legislature will likely revisit the budget in August and perhaps into the fall via special session, plus the longer term work that we're doing with the task force, it's likely that active Green Means Go discussions will continue through the fall. Additionally, the fall is a key time frame for any legislative proposals we may want to work on for the 2021 legislative session. In terms of the budget, the contract is funded entirely through member dues, and it was included in the recently adopted SACOG budget. So therefore, staff is recommending that the Policy and Innovation Committee recommend that the board authorize the executive director to execute a contract amendment to extend KP Public Affairs contract.
Great, thank you, Christina. Do we have questions from any of our directors, committee members? Christina, I do have one question. And that question is, yes, of course, these folks work on Green Means Go, but they're also working on other items that they're advocating for on behalf of SACOG, correct?
Correct, yes. They're also our general lobbyists.
Okay, and I think that's really important because we don't know what Green Means Go is going to look like if there will be opportunity to advocate this year on it. However, with all that's taking place, if there's additional dollars for infrastructure, different projects, then we certainly want to have the opportunity to advocate for those on behalf of SACOG. So I think that's a good reminder. It's not just about Green Means Go, but it's about SACOG's overall advocacy and lobbying strategy.
Correct.
Any other questions? All right, I will open this up to the public if there's any comments from the public.
There is a public comment from Mr. Tartaguia.
Okay, great. Let's bring him in.
You've done a very good job, I consider, of answering what my concerns and questions were in light of listening to both the Senate and the Assembly in this discussion. So you've answered what was important to be, I think, asked, which was why, when there is so much concern on the COVID virus, that you would try when essentially both the Assembly and the Senate have said that we're not taking any more legislation, even though there's about 15 bills that are going forward beyond the COVID virus forward. And there's 2 more meetings going on the oversight taking place this week. So thank you. You've answered effectively the questions of why I raised my hand.
Great. Thank you, Jeffrey. Appreciate that comment. And anybody else, Lynette?
I don't see anyone else, Chair Gore.
All right, great. We'll close public comment and bring it back to the committee. Any other conversation before somebody makes a motion?
I'm happy to move the item, Chair Gore.
All right, motion by committee member
Second.
Frericks and second by
Kozlowski.
Kozlowski. All right, roll call, please.
Thank you. Director Allard,
Yes.
Douglas,
Aye.
Frericks,
Aye.
Kozlowski,
Yes.
Leahy,
Yes.
Lozano,
Aye.
Zaragoza,
Aye.
Vice Chair Stallard,
Aye.
and Chair Gore.
Yes,
Motion carries.
thank you. We'll move on to item 3, which is an information item, our advocacy update. And Christina, take it away again, please. Anything interesting and new you can tell us?
Thanks. There's a lot happening. Since our last committee meeting, Congress and the state legislature have slowly begun resuming normal-ish activities. As to be expected, it's not really normal or using traditional schedules or methods, but committees are meeting and they are doing work on non-pandemic focused issues, conversations and hearings. So starting to slowly get back to normal. At the federal level, the House released its transportation reauthorization proposal last week. They've called it the Investing in a New Vision for the Environment and Surface Transportation in America Act, which stands for Invest in America Act. So as a quick reminder, the current Surface Transportation Authorization, the FAST Act, which provides our federal funding for transportation, expires at the end of the federal fiscal year in September of 2020. Discussion of reauthorization has focused on the need to invest in infrastructure, and particularly now there has been also talk about how to include some sort of stimulus package in reauthorization, which has to occur this year anyway. The reauthorization process is fairly complicated, with multiple committees in each house having jurisdiction over various components. 7 committees in all have some jurisdiction over some component of reauthorization. The Invest in America Act is only the second reauthorization proposal to be produced by any of the committees. The Senate, as a reminder, the Senate Environmental and Public Works Committee, the EPW committee, approved a highways bill last year. The Transportation and Infrastructure Committee in the House has scheduled a markup for June 17th for the Invest in America Act. The bill is expected to move to the full House sometime in early July. The bill varies significantly from the Senate EPW proposal, so we're pretty far away, I think, still in seeing a deal reached on reauthorization. However, this legislation is critical to understanding the Democrats' proposal and what they're going to focus on in conversations for reauthorization. We'll probably end up having to see a continuing of the FAST Act, though, in the near term, particularly with this being an election year, with a full reauthorization potentially not happening until next year. Now, we hear also that they might come through with something this year, but given the statements coming from both the Senate and the House and how they are differing quite a bit in what they want to focus and prioritize, it is unlikely that we might see a full deal by this year. However, there continues to be quite a bit of talk about the need for stimulus money for infrastructure. So there is a chance that as part of that conversation, we might see something with reauthorization come through. And on the stimulus conversations, we've been working very closely with Placer County Transportation Planning Agency, El Dorado County Transportation Commission, and our partners to identify stimulus-ready projects in our region. And this list goes beyond the transportation sector to include a broad range of infrastructure projects: water, transportation, healthcare, Green Means Go. And from this relatively quick outreach, we've identified over $9 billion worth of need for projects in our region that are stimulus ready. We are working to finalize the list and compile a summary and narrative that we can then use in our state and federal advocacy for the need and readiness of our region for stimulus dollars. And we will have more for you at a presentation at our board meeting in June. I'll pause there before I move on to the state to see if there's any questions on the federal side of the update.
Questions for Christina about federal advocacy? Doesn't sound like there are any, so go ahead and continue, Christina.
Great, thanks. So moving on to Sacramento, the state legislature is quickly moving through a condensed legislative calendar. As a reminder, they recessed in mid-March for a little over a month, and then they came back in May, and they are operating under two constitutional deadlines that kind of hasten their efforts and rush their process: the June 15th deadline to pass a state budget and the August 31st deadline to end session for the year. Now they can call a special session if needed after August, but the regular timeline for introduced legislation, they have to finish by August 31st. As you see in your staff report, SACOG has taken a position on 3 bills: SB 1291, AB 3205, and AB 3116. So I want to provide a quick update on those bills. I'll start first with AB 3116. This is the bill we opposed. I'm starting with it because it's no longer moving through. The bill sought to restrict local agencies from requesting specific data regarding shared mobility devices, including bikes, scooters, transportation network companies, TNCs like Uber and Lyft, and autonomous vehicles. SACOG and many cities throughout California and the League of Cities were concerned with the limitations it placed and the impact it would have on limiting transportation safety and equity planning. However, as I mentioned, the bill is dead now. It was placed on the Assembly Appropriation Suspense file for having an estimated cost of over $1 million annually to the state. And the bill did not make it off of the suspense file last week, so therefore it is dead and not moving forward. The other 2 bills we took positions on were support positions, and both of them are continuing to move through the legislature. The first is AB 3205, and this creates a new grant program within GoBiz with the intention of encouraging economic growth and collaboration within regions throughout the state. And this program aligns strongly with the SACOG prosperity strategy work we've done and the funding proposal for Green Means Go. And so we've joined the coalition led by California Forward, which also includes Valley Vision, local and statewide chambers of commerce, and regional community foundations. The bill passed off of the suspense file last week and is now on the Assembly floor. The other bill is SB 1291, and this is an urgency bill that suspends the 2020 requirement for an MPO to submit a Federal Transportation Improvement Program FTIP to Caltrans. This is a state requirement that we submit it every 2 years. And in light of COVID and staff capacity, the Senate Transportation Committee is moving this bill forward to relieve local jurisdictions of this requirement just for this year. And the bill is currently in the Senate Appropriations Committee. Moving now to the state budget, as you can imagine, with the deadline to pass the budget happening in about a week from today, actually, on the 15th, there's been quite a lot of movement. In mid-May, the governor released his proposed budget via the May revise, which responded to a projected $54+ billion shortfall or deficit. Last week, the Senate and the Assembly announced that they had reached a budget deal with each other that uses alternatives to many of the cuts included in the governor's budget. The Senate and the Assembly typically are negotiating between themselves and then with the governor, kind of making 3 parties to the budget negotiations. So it's interesting to see the Senate and the Assembly coming together and joining forces and producing their own joint budget to then negotiate together with the governor in this upcoming week before the budget must be passed. So both budgets obviously include significant reductions. They both rely on that $54 billion deficit number. The main difference is how they rely on potential federal funds. Both budgets are assuming that the federal government is going to provide additional federal support to state and local governments. However, the two budgets differ on when to pull the trigger if additional federal relief funds do not materialize. And as I mentioned, in Washington, the Senate and the President all need to agree before anything can become law, yet there seems to be quite a bit of disagreement amongst all parties about what the path forward is, if there even is going to be a path forward for more money going to the states. So it's quite a bit of a question about whether or not either of these budgets will be able to get the federal dollars that they are expecting. Governor Newsom's budget includes $14 billion in trigger cuts if the federal government does not provide more money, while the legislature's proposed budget includes $7 billion in trigger cuts. And also the legislature's proposed budget delays those cuts to happening until October 1st to give more time for Congress to reach a deal. The legislature also proposes spending more money from reserves, borrowing more money from internal accounts, and delaying spending reductions until later this year and how it plans to respond to the deficit. The legislature is also expected to continue to revisit the state budget through at least August as it continues to respond to the pandemic and after receipt of tax payments are due July 15th. So while a budget has to be passed by Monday, we will likely see these conversations to continue to happen through the end of August and potentially even into the fall through special sessions. And that's really where our Green Means Go advocacy comes in. As I mentioned, we are shifting our focus to August budget discussions, and we're also working to include Green Means Go in the governor's Economic Recovery Task Force recommendations. Since the last update at our last committee meeting, we've been meeting with key members of the task force and the relevant subcommittees to discuss Green Means Go and highlight potential stimulus-ready Green Means Go projects. And at our June board meeting, KP Public Affairs will provide a more in-depth update to our activities to date and also the plan moving forward. And also I want to mention at the board meeting, you'll also be hearing a presentation and voting on a draft framework for regional early action planning funds, REAP housing planning money that was included in last year's state budget. It corresponds to the LEAP housing funding for local, that goes directly to local governments. And you'll also be hearing about our efforts to work with jurisdictions to identify green zones. And all of this work, Green Means Go, REAP money, LEAP money, green zones, is interrelated as we continue to focus on accelerating infill development in our region and our housing options. And that concludes my state update.
Great, thank you, Christina. Questions from committee members? Any questions?
Oh, I have one. Christina, what's the different trigger dates for the Assembly and the Senate in terms of when they would, the trigger dates for having to do the cuts?
So the Senate and the Assembly have proposed a joint budget that includes triggers happening October 1st.
So they're both October 1st.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah. So it's interesting because it's pretty. I'm trying to remember. I don't want to misspeak, but I think it's pretty uncommon to see the Senate and the Assembly coming together this early and then differing with the governor and the budget negotiations. And so they have produced a joint budget together. So there's no difference between the Assembly and the Senate's proposed budget this year, which also means I believe they are not planning to use the conference committee process this year either.
Yeah, that's correct. No conference this year. Just just the governor and the two Dem leaders in each house.
The big three.
Yep.
Any other questions from committee members? Okay, let's go ahead and open this up. Well, do we have any public comment? Let's see if we've got any public comment on this item.
Chair Gore, we do have a public comment from Mr. Tartaguia.
Great. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Well, I thank you. I was a little puzzled why Regional Transit had put on the YouTube about their meeting tonight, but my understanding is Dorothy Matsui is going to be as a special guest tonight. I'm hoping that she brings us some new news related to transportation. I know that Omnibera is convinced that this year there should be some transportation moving forward. So we live in hopes, and we hope, and indeed, but part of the reason that this joint of Assembly and Senate was a lot of coalitions pushed at them to push back against the governor's proposed cuts of July 1st. So hope something will come out of this coming week.
Thank you,
My
Jeffrey.
public comment.
Appreciate it very much. Anyone else for public comment? All right, we'll close public comment, and if there's no other comments by directors, then thank you, Christina, and we will move to item 4, which is the Mega Region Working Group meeting summary. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Chair Gore. Good morning, committee members. So thanks for this. Now I'd certainly want to allow for Directors Frericks and Allard to weigh in, since they are 2 members of the 4 of the SACOG board who are on the Mega Region Working Group. I'm going to give a quick update from the last meeting and then allow for some discussion. Just as a reminder for the committee, we actually have had an effort involving the San Francisco Bay Area's sort of peer agency, MTC, and San Joaquin County, the Council of Governments in San Joaquin County, and SACOG dating back to 2015 formally, and actually decades before that along the I-80 corridor, the Capitol corridor. And Director Frericks has really, I think, reinvigorated this working group, really pushed this along this year. We've had 2 meetings now of the Mega Region Working Group. There are, again, 4 members of the SACOG board, 4 members of the San Joaquin COG board, and 4 members of the Metropolitan Transportation Commission. We last met on May the 8th. And I think to summarize, as you see in your packet and your materials, there are kind of 3 areas that we're talking about in which we can cooperate and work together. And it really, because I'm a fan of alliteration, it is aligning 3 Ps: aligning our plans, aligning our policies, and aligning our projects. So let me just kind of address each one of those. In terms of aligning our plans, and this has gotten quite a bit of conversation, despite some efforts that we've had in coordination, each of our regions does 20-year transportation and growth plans. We assume things about how we're going to grow, how we're going to build transportation investments. And we also assume things about what else is happening just across our borders, our regional borders in the Bay Area, in the Central Valley. And sometimes we assume different things about what happens in those other places. And that leads to a lack of potentially good coordination around transportation investments across our borders, and many other things. So the working group has had quite a bit of conversation about trying to figure out how we better align our plans. One, in addition to sort of a lot of the data and the development of those plans going forward to be more in coordination, the groups also talked about literally syncing up our plans so that they would be on the same calendar, so that we would be going through a lot of the preparation of our data and our projections at the same time, rather than currently we're pretty staggered amongst the 3 regions. You might actually see, and I want to give you a reminder on this and just a heads up, there's a lot of interest in actually bringing a resolution, first to the working group when they meet again on August 28th, but a resolution that the 3 boards might adopt, spelling out some of these commitments to work together. So that's the first on plans, on policies, and it's a good follow-on to the update you just heard from Christina Lockie. But we believe that we're going to be stronger actually working together in the state legislature at the state level. There's some consistent, not just rumors, but efforts our friends in Southern California to try to take some of the rail money at the state level to push more investment down to Southern California, and that if we continue to kind of work individually, San Joaquin Valley and Sacramento region, the Bay Area, we're not going to be as strong, frankly, in the legislature as we would be otherwise. That we need to band together a little bit more. That's partly about things like rail money, and it's partly about a set of other policies as well. So we have, not unlike you've seen here, the Policy and Innovation Committee begun outlining some key kind of policy principles that we are, the three regions would work together on the state level. And then finally, aligning projects. This is, again, something that I don't want to suggest we haven't thought of or actually done anything about, but we could probably do more on. And that is simply to understand that a lot of our projects actually are going to benefit this larger mega region. So, and we might do better and be more successful at the state level if we actually develop these projects in coordination with one another, have a stronger working relationship, and that we even do things, as frankly, again, we've already started doing, which is supporting perhaps a transportation project in the Bay Area or in the Central Valley because we know that it has transportation benefits for our region. The Capital Corridor is a great example of this, and that we would look to the Bay Area and its delegation, and frankly, its position of leadership in the legislature, which we don't have as much of these days. We look to folks like the Bay Area and the San Joaquin Valley to support our own projects, like Third Track to Roseville, for example, but many others. There was, by the way, a great example of this recently, and I do want to remind and reemphasize part of the working relationships that we already have as a staff with the Bay Area and San Joaquin County. We were able to take advantage of some trade corridor and goods movement funding that was on projects in our adjacent regions, the projects which were delayed. We were able, through our partnership, to actually move those monies to the Metro Air Park interchange near the Sacramento National Airport. We were able to accelerate an auxiliary lane project, which is allowing for some interchanges to accelerate in advance. I just talked to Troy Givens at Sacramento County, praising our efforts on this money and saying, look, if you hadn't done that, we would actually have waited another couple of years for this, and we would have been a little slower to actually attract, even this time of economic crisis. There's still a lot of interest in Metro Air Park and some of the development around the airport there. So again, just an example of our coordination, but again, we think we can do better, we can do more. And we think that even setting up for this summer, we are gearing up, as many of you know, for some of the state competitive grant programs, congested corridors. We just took an action on the trade corridor program at the Transportation Committee. You'll see it at the board later this month. But what if we actually worked up to the 2022 round of competitive grant programs, and we actually jointly went in together on some projects that actually truly had a mega region benefit? So that's a little bit of where we stand. Again, work around plans, policies, and projects. We've had, I think, really good discussions. Interestingly, as we're seeing here as well in the going virtual for everything, one of the logistical challenges of getting the mega region working group together was finding a time that our board members from all three regions could find an afternoon to get together and spend, frankly, 2, 3, 4 hours each way just to get together. That's a day-long commitment. Perhaps we think maybe the virtual world is now going to further facilitate, we hope, these meetings. We have another one on Friday, August 28th. Anyone is welcome to join. And then we'll have another one later this fall in November. We did have an in-person summit that we were hoping to do in person before the pandemic at UC Davis on that August 28th date. Chair Frericks had been talking to UC Davis as the place to host this. As you might imagine, we have canceled plans for an in-person event with what we're hoping to be a pretty large crowd, but we are looking at some other options that might be virtual sometime this fall. So this is really a lot of work this year with the working group to lay the groundwork moving forward, to maybe even go into 2021 and 2022, again, with a much more, I think, intentional set of strategies to coordinate our efforts across the mega region. And finally, I would just say, we really want to pull in a lot of our business partners between GSEC, the Metro Chamber, the Bay Area Council, Silicon Valley Leadership Group, San Joaquin County Partnership, because we think increasingly, and maybe even through the pandemic and post-pandemic, our economy will be knitted together more and more. Our labor force and our labor shed will be more than just 6 counties or 9 counties. Telework perhaps might allow some of our companies in California to remain in California, maybe move some of their operations from the Bay Area to the Valley, to Sacramento region. Lots of question marks. We don't have the answers to all that, but our business partners are very closely engaged in this effort as well. And so I think with that, I'll end my update and certainly allow a chance for Directors Frerichs or Allard to weigh in if they'd like.
Thank you, James. Appreciate that update. Actually, terrific work. Lucas, John, anything you'd like to share?
I mean, honestly, I think that's a pretty comprehensive update, and I don't have much to add. I mean, I appreciate the work that staff is doing, and particularly SACOG is sort of running point on this year in this effort. So I really appreciate all that work. But yeah, I think that was a pretty comprehensive update. So looking forward to some of the next steps. I think there is some pretty tangible things for the sort of 3 regions to be working on together, especially as it relates to this sort of aligning the transportation sort of plans and such, and it is going to involve a legislative effort as well. So thanks.
John, did you want to say anything?
Yeah, I'll just add, first of all, that was a great report, James. I would just want to express my thanks to Lucas for making this a priority, because one of the challenges that the Sacramento region has always had, and this isn't a criticism of any organization or politician in the Sacramento region, we really don't have that much influence in the capital. We never have. We're fighting the LA basin, if you want to call it that, and the San Francisco Bay Area, which has always had tremendous influence in Sacramento and back in Washington, D.C. So I think this is a really important effort. If we can get folks together, for nothing else than to just lobby on transportation funding, it'll be a tremendous accomplishment. So I just want to thank James and Lucas for their efforts.
Absolutely. Thank you. Great comments. Anybody else any questions from any of the directors, committee members? All right, we can go ahead and open it up to the public. Do we have anyone from the public that wanted to speak?
I don't see anyone, Chair Gore.
Okay, great. Well, good work. Thank you. And with that, we don't have anything else on our agenda. Anything else from you, James or Eric, before we adjourn to our next meeting?
No, Chair Gore, I would just, to build on some of Christina's earlier comments, just want to have you all be prepared for a bit of a deep dive at the June board meeting around a lot of things related to state advocacy. Green Means Go effort. I believe we're going to have KP come and speak. So just be prepared for that, because I think, again, to this theme that I'm thrilled to hear you all discussing and really owning in terms of how do we build our influence at a state level. Green Means Go is a first step in that. It's a great first step in it, because I think it does unite the region, as we've seen from our efforts so far. It just got a lot harder over the last few months with the pandemic and the huge hole in the state budget, but nevertheless, as Mike Lucan and I have been sort of discussing pretty frequently these days, this is a multi-year effort. We have to stick with it. We have to be persistent, and just looking forward to some good discussion with the rest of the board at your board meeting in a couple of weeks. Next week.
Great. Thank you, James. Appreciate it. So with that, thanks everyone for joining us today. We will wrap up our meeting. Our next committee meeting will be on August 10th. And whether it's here or at the boardroom, we're not yet sure. one of the conversations I had with Eric was just about in the future how we might have our committee meetings. And maybe there's a way, depending on when things are more comfortable and people open up, maybe we do a committee meeting in person 1 month and then teleconference or via Zoom another month and trade off. And that way we're actually saving time and energy having to drive from other parts of the region, but still can have some good dialogue. Or maybe we do Zoom calls when we don't have intense agenda items, but when we have things that require a little bit more deeper dives or need more robust conversation, maybe we have those meetings in person. So we can certainly love to hear your thoughts about that. But I love the fact that somebody doesn't have to drive in from Folsom for an hour meeting and then have to get back. So love to hear your thoughts about that as we move forward with our committee meetings.
I
Great
think it's
idea.
good. I drive in for an hour.
Yeah, good idea.
All right, terrific. So with that, then we will not have a committee meeting in July, but like I said, August 10th we will, and then we'll have a board meeting next week on the 18th. So thanks everyone. I appreciate your time and we will see you next week.
Thank you, Bonnie.
Thank
All
you.
right, bye.
Bonnie.
Sure, Laura.